So, Pilgrim got its Halloween update, which came with a handful of changes. Most of these changes were some of the best we could have ever gotten, so let's stop stalling and get into it. This video will be separated into two segments, shadow changes and public changes. I'll put the timestamps on screen or you can look at the chapter feature on YouTube to go to any segment you guys want to look at. Starting with the actual event itself, the map got a change to where all grass and trees and maybe some other stuff I didn't check yet, but they got changed to look like Patchland Grove. Speaking of Patchland Grove, if you talk to Mr. Pumpkino there and choose the Happy Halloween option, you'll get the new and improved Pumpkin Drip. Also, Hababalons. Next change is the sword and staff base crit chance increase from 5% to 10%. If you don't know what this means, I'll explain it to you. Since the beginning of the game, every melee weapon and staff have an invisible stat, which is just 5% extra crit, active at all times. So yes, the old sword, bronze sword, etc. does have crit chance, you just can't see it. And in this update, this crit chance got increased, which is pretty cool. Noxious Mortar got gutted. You see, I don't know what happened to the weapon since I don't really use it that much, but I think they nerfed the sticky jump feature and nerfed the damage. Can't really check this right now since I'm writing the script in my first period at school, so next change. Next change is the Vuvuzela and iVuvuzela having a heavy attack to where you can kill your minions letting them respond quickly. This change is whatever, but a buff is a buff. Next change is the Mushroom Cap having an extra stat where you can spawn in an extra minion. This is a really good change to those who enjoy using Vuvuzelas, so I respect developers for that. Next change is the Mana Flint taking the required mana as health if you don't have enough. What it did before was take a set amount of health, so it'd always be the same. Now it'll be a little inconsistent since it scales with what magic weapon you're using. Cool rework nonetheless. Power Locket got a huge buff where they buffed each power stacks damage from 6% to 8%, but reduced the max stacks from 10 to 8. I would have said slight rework if I hadn't done the math, but this overall is a huge buff. Not only do you get 64% more damage at max stacks compared to the 60% damage at max stacks, early max stacks deal more damage, so it's a huge win-win for the Power Locket. Stoke Bowstring got a buff to where it's 30% longer charge and 20% more damage taken while charging, to 20% longer charge and 10% more damage taken while charging. I never really used bows ever, not even after the rework, but a buff is a buff, so yeah. Next change is that Vision Goggles got a huge rework, making it so that if you roll an attack, you get a buff called Secret that lasts 3 seconds and gives 20% crit chance. This is probably one of the best changes ever. They give an item that everyone used an extra stat, even if the use for it was cosmetic and being able to see reason, but giving it 20% crit chance that stacks with other crit buffs is a really good change. Good shit, devs. Next change is Charm Gem getting buffed, going from 20% increased crit damage to 25% increased crit damage. This change is very niche, but as I said for other changes, a buff is a buff. Next change is Perception Ace damage going from 25% to 20%. I don't know why they touched such a niche skill, but in some situations it was pretty good. You can completely replace Juggernaut with Perception Ace and Sweeper Catacomb since every melee weapon uses Light Gem now, so it's basically a straight upgrade. Last public change is the Focus Rework, making it so that the base version can allow you to roll while stunned and blocking or parrying when aced. This sounds like a really good change, although I haven't tested it since I'm running the script in class, but definitely better than what it was before. I'll probably put a screenshot on screen showing what it did before the rework. Alright then, that's all the public changes, now onto the shadow changes. As much as I like the public changes, the shadow changes are 10 times cooler, but why do they always hide the cool shit? Starting with the Mana Blade rework that made its heavy attack like the ranged projectiles Archmage has. It does 75 damage not including spin, and uses all mana and gives 75% of max mana back, and all of these do scale with mana, damage, etc. Honestly, one of my favorite reworks in the game, just right next to the Prime brand. Giving a weapon a cool special that already has cool gimmicks is just one of the best things ever. Next change is the Wicked Limb rework. It's mostly a buff, but it's a rework, so yeah, let's get into it. Starting with the M1, every time you land a successful M1, you get the Wicked buff. It lasts up to 3 seconds and 1 second minimum, and stacks up until 5. Every stack gives you 5% faster cast speed for the Wicked Limb, and 5% extra movement speed in general. They also made it heavy like the Suck Attack from N. It does around 1/4 of M1 damage and gives you 2 buffs, Super Armor and Wicked Pull, which reflects attacks for a little bit, and gives 75% damage resistance. Next change is Sulfur and Rockolio being added to the material roster for Alchemy. Sulfur increases damage in AoE, and Rockolio increases defense by a lot, but reduces your speed by a lot. Next shadow change is actually a really cool one. Since rare gems were a pain to get and boring, the developers solved this by adding a pebble gem variant to every biome that has a rare gem. I'll put some screenshots on the screen to show you these pebbles. Also, they only spawn if you mine areas that have rare ores. Next shadow change is Vuvuzela Reforges and Gems. They gave Vuvuzelas 3 Reforges. I'm not counting average since all it does is turn the iVuvuzela and the Thief Vuvuzela into their vanilla form. Alright, onto the Reforges. Hulking increases summons health by 30% and damage by 10%. In exchange, summons have 30% less speed. Merciless increases summons damage by 20% and reduces health by 75%. And lastly, Mischievous increases summon speed by 30% and reduces damage by 10%. Next shadow change is the Fragile Whetstone buff. They made it so that it's 20% less damage on non-crit attacks, do only 10% less damage now. This is a huge DPS buff overall, and this marks the last change for crit, at least positive change. But damn, 4 buffs to crit builds, I'd be surprised if they aren't meta at this point. Next shadow change is the Mana Feather buff. They made it so that when you roll, you get 25% of your mana to getting 100% of your mana. Really good buff to an underused Big Iron accessory. Next shadow change is the Mana Heart buff, giving it a special ability. They made it so that natural gained mana can go 25% past the maximum mana cap. Pretty good change for an underused item. Next shadow change is the Blood Gem buff. A few days prior to this video, I made a video where I talked about why the Pilgrammed was boring and showed one of the reasons why it was boring, and one of them was Blood Gem not giving a damage buff anymore. Well, it got referred with a slightly heavy downside, but who cares? At least we can use a gem that isn't the fucking Frost Gem anymore. Next shadow change is Bear Clover, getting an extra 5% crit chance. This was a pretty good change since it actually adds a reason to use this accessory now. Next shadow change is the Mana Dissonance nerf, making it so that spells casted by any magic weapon during the ability is reduced by 20%. You probably know why this change got added. Next shadow change is Alchemist getting moved up 1 slot. Do I need to say anything? Next shadow change is being able to stack both eggs. Do I need to say any more? The next shadow change is the Lucky Reforged nerf, making it give only 10% crit again. Damn, this Reforged getting the mysterious charm treatment every update. Alright then, that's every change being some people fine. Not all these shadow changes was stuff I found, some other people brought these shadow changes to my attention, so I'd like to credit them now. Shoutouts to Haze for Gem Pebbles, Apples for Wicked Limb and 1 buff, and there was some person for the Mana Blade shit, but I forgot who they were, so sorry. Well, but that's it. This update in terms of balancing and reworks was generally some of the best I've ever seen up until this point. I'm just speechless. I don't know who was on the balancing team, but they cooked hella this time. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you fellas next time. But also, since I was writing the script in school, one of my friend in my Spanish class noticed writing something, so I told him I'm a YouTuber for this small game, and I just told them, you know what, tell me a quote and I'll put in the video, and they said, never waste diamonds on hoes. Thank you, Thomas. Have a good day, guys.